Now, a few days ago, I put out a tweet asking for people to send me their drafts, and here are 5 of them that I'm going to rate. Alright, so the first draft comes from a good friend of mine, FPL Renarid9. He's gone for Onana in goal, a 4-4-2 with Estupinian, Gabriel, Trent, Henry, Rashford, Maddison, Saka, Bruno Fernandes, Gabriel Jesus, and Haaland. I think that back line is really strong. I don't really have too much to add on Onana, Estupinian, Gabriel, and Trent. I think, that sort of 4 is probably the 4 best defenders and goalkeepers in the game at the moment. Obviously, you could drop the goalkeeper to a 4.5 and potentially upgrade Henry to a 5, but realistically, Gabriel and Estupinian are probably the only 2 sort of 5.0 million options. I'm not a massive fan of Rico Henry. I think there are other 4.5 million defenders that are better. Perhaps the likes of Matty Cash could have a bit more attacking upside and maybe just a few more clean sheets. I know Henry is a solid option that's nailed in that Brentford team, but perhaps you could do slightly better with maybe a different 4.5 million defender. Rashford is a great option. It looks like Mount playing on that left-hand side of that midfield 3 and actually moving out wide a little bit in the build-up play. Certainly that's how Man United look to be playing in pre-season, with Rashford drifting inside and getting lots of chances. So he looks like a good option. I know Renarid is a Tottenham fan. He's backing Maddison to do really well by the looks of it because he's gone for him and his team. For me personally, I think Maddison is a great player. There's no denying, Maddison's ability, but exactly how he fits into that Spurs team, I'm not totally sure. I think he might take a bit of time to bed in. Certainly he's a player I'm monitoring and he could be great value at 7.5 million. But I think just to start with, you could go for someone else. But yeah, it's obviously backed Maddison as a Tottenham fan and in fair play. Saka, unbelievable value, 8.5 million. I think they priced him way too cheap. And to be honest, I wouldn't be surprised if he's in all of the drafts that we're going to go through, to be honest, because he is just such good value. I really like Bruno Fernandes as well. All the sort of benefits that Saka brings, really. Unlimited minutes is the wrong term, but he never seems to really miss even a minute of football. He's on the penalties, takes some of the free kicks. I think he's going to have a similar level of attacking responsibility that he had towards the end of last season. Remember, we began last season playing in midfield, basically. Deep in midfield, and that didn't really work out too well for his attacking returns. But towards the end of the season, he really started to play more of an attacking role. And he actually had 16 expected assists last season and only managed 8. So his returns were basically retracted by the fact that Man United didn't have a stellar finisher in their side. Maybe with the signing of Højlund, that might change. It looks like Man United are going to get him, so I think that makes Bruno Fernandes a really good option. And Jesus and Haaland, they're shoe-in strikers, really. I think Gabriel Jesus has probably the best expected points and certainly some really good opening fixtures as well. And comparing him to Nkunku, who is the other player you could pick in that position, obviously going Nkunku and maybe downgrading Onana allows you to get Shaw in for Henry. That could be a way to play it. But the thing is with Nkunku, he's unproven in the Premier League, He could look good on paper, had great stats in the Bundesliga, but we all know Bundesliga to Premier League is a bit of a dodgy one. Haaland obviously did fantastically last season, but then you got the likes of Jadon Sancho and a list of other players that are flopped in, like Kai Havertz. I know Kai Havertz isn't a massive flop, but he certainly didn't perform to the level that he did in the Bundesliga. So I think Nkunku's probably a wait and see, which is the reason why Renarid here is clearly gone for Jesus. Then Haaland is his captain, but you can't really argue with that. Kabore on his bench looks like a 4.0 million starting wing back for Luton. Can't really gripe at that. The only point is he misses game week 2, so for that reason I think Baldock's a slightly better option because at least he's got 3 fixtures in 3 game weeks. Nakamba, he's going to play every game for Luton. I think he's probably the best 4.5 million midfielder, primarily because he's the only one that's going to play. And then Archer up top again. I think there are some 4.5 million strikers that are going to get minutes. Balogun, Semenyo and Archer, probably all of them. And yeah, he's gone for Archer, so fair enough. In terms of expected points, DraftHound gives you 59.7 expected points for game week 1, and I'm giving this team a 9 out of 10. I think it's really good. With a couple of changes for me, you could make it a 10. Next up, we've got a good friend of mine as well, Josh Waldridge. He won probably the biggest single prize I've ever seen in fantasy football. A couple of seasons ago, he won the fan team game. Maybe Josh will get in the comments on Twitter, but I'm pretty sure he grossed over £200,000 by winning that game. So he really does know his stuff when it comes to fantasy football, and that's backed up by the fact he's won a boatload of money playing it. His team is really interesting, in my opinion. He's gone for double Everton defence. Pickford in goal, Tarkowski, Gabriel and Estupinian. Just talking about that defence, personally, I think you can do better than Pickford in goal. I know 4.5 million is a good price, and Josh is obviously backing him to keep some clean sheets alongside getting saves, but I know they had a bit of time under Dyche last season, right? A lot of the argument for Everton is a full Dyche pre-season is going to transform them defensively and they're going to start keeping clean sheets, but even Burnley didn't keep that many clean sheets, did they, when he was in charge of them? I just don't think they're gonna perform to that level. And obviously going for someone like Tarkowski, he's got a bit of goal threat, but realistically he's going to score most of his points from keeping clean sheets, and I don't really back them to do that. And likewise with Pickford, I'm just not sure there's many clean sheets there. I know Fulham without Mitrovic is an exciting game for a clean sheet, as is Wolves on the other side of Villa, but I still feel like Everton could concede in both of those games. But that's just my opinion, but you've asked for it, I guess, by submitting your team, Josh. Gabriel and Estupinian, and as I said on the previous slot, I think they're the two best 5.0 million defenders, and yeah, absolutely can see why they're in your team. I do really like Jared Bowen. I named him actually as one of the players I think is actually going to finish on one of the top scoring players in the game. The thing that put me off is the Chelsea and Brighton fixtures amongst the first three, but I mean, the thing is with Bowen, he's a 90-minute man. He plays every game, played every game in the Premier League last season, despite being in European football. Could take the penalties. I heard Antonio might be off to Saudi, and Ben Rama's not a nailed starter, and Rice is obviously off. He took some penalties as well, so Bowen could be on the penalties. And even though he didn't have a barnstorming year last season, he did all right in terms of underlying numbers. And I think we all saw that West Ham went through a bit of a dip towards the middle of last season where they were really fighting it out in the relegation zone. They came out the other side of that and won the European competition. I think they're going to reinvest that Declan Rice money really well as well. Looks like they're going for Conor Gallagher as their first sign-in. He'd be a fantastic addition to that West Ham team. And I think they'll kick on post-selling Declan Rice. And for me, that means Bowen's going to do really well this season. I think he's a good option. Rashford and Saka, I talked about those when going through Renarid's team, but I really like them both as an option. Same with Bruno Fernandes. Son is a player we haven't seen. He's really exciting to me. He obviously played the whole of last season with a hernia, and he's regularly been saying that in interviews, the fact that he played through the whole of last season in pain, basically. So, you know, he's had the necessary procedures to get rid of that now. I think he can kick on and do really well this year. I really like him as an option. And forgetting the last time we had a fit Son in the Premier League, he won the Golden Boot. And the stats suggest that if Kane actually goes, Son does better without Kane in the team in terms of returns, because he takes the penalties as well without Kane in the team. So I really do like him in Son. And Nkunku, I spoke about him before as well. Just think he's a bit unproven in the Premier League, but the Chelsea fixtures, bar the Liverpool one to start off, are absolutely amazing. So I can see why you've done that. And Erling Haaland there, no surprise, he's in your team, and as captain, he's probably the best player in the game so far. I've given this team an 8 out of 10, purely because I don't think I'd be starting with either Nkunku or Bowen. Just with Bowen, the fixtures are just a bit too tough, and Nkunku is just unproven. And then that Everton defence isn't for me either. I can certainly see why you've done it, and you've won more money than I ever have in fantasy football, Josh, so you might well be right. All right, next up, we've got FPL MFZ. He's got Onana, Estupinian, Gabriel, and John Stones. John Stones is a player we haven't spoken about on the previous drafts. It's looking like his average position in pre-season is basically in line with the centre forwards. He's playing really, really advanced in that, well, new midfield position that he's got, so he could be a really good option in defence. The one thing I'd say with John Stones is his minutes do get managed a little bit by Pep Guardiola, purely because he's just a little bit more injury prone than other players in that Man City squad. So he probably plays the first three fixtures, but as Champions League and Premier League and the Cup start getting mixed together, I would expect to see some benchings for Stones, purely because he's going to be protected a little bit from injuries, I would suggest. But yeah, I mean, first three fixtures, Burnley, Newcastle, Sheffield United, and you've got a bit of bench cover there if you want to, start Colwill over him. I think that's a really good pick. Foden, I would say he was a fantastic pick, and I still probably think he is with Mahrez gone. I think he's probably going to play on the right-hand side, but through pre-season, it looks like Bernardo Silva's been playing there. Whether Bernardo Silva leaves Man City as well is another question, but another point to note about their pre-season actually as well is Kevin De Bruyne has been on their bench, and with, well, basically 2 weeks to go until the start of the season now, I think he's going to play. And one of the things we said about Phil Foden was Kevin De Bruyne is injured, so Phil Foden's going to play. I don't think that's going to be the case anymore going into the start of the season, which I think retracts Phil Foden a little bit as an option. I've spoken about Rashford and Saka before. I also think Martinelli's a great option. He's only priced at 8 million. They've made him slightly cheaper than Saka and Odegaard. I think that's based on the fact he's going to get less minutes. I think he is going to get less minutes, but his attacking returns last season were still fantastic, even when he did get benched. I think he only got benched in 3 of the 38 games across the season, and I'm pretty sure in 2 of the 3 games he got benched in, he scored off of the bench. And in one of the games, I think he actually got a brace off of the bench. So he scored 3 goals in 3 games that he got benched last season. So I think Martinelli's a great option. Mitoma as well. I mean, there's lots of 6.5 million mids you can pick from. I think I just prefer Eze and Mbumo to them, purely because they've got the set pieces on their hands. And Mitoma, some are arguing he got found out a little bit, where players learn to send him on his weaker foot, and that sort of retracts his attacking threat a little bit. But with the early fixtures that Brighton have, Luton, Wolves and West Ham, I think that's a good starting set of fixtures, really. So I can see why you've gone for him. And Nkunku, I think the point with Nkunku for me, really, is just just unproven in the Premier League, really. And then Haaland is your captain. Absolutely fine with that. I've gone for a 9 rating in this team. There's one player I wouldn't have, and that's Foden. I think the rest of this team is, well, Foden and Nkunku probably, but I can see why you've gone for Nkunku because you ran out of budget. Maybe dropping Foden to someone like Mbumo or Eze, and then going for Jesus up front instead of Nkunku. I know that makes your team very, very template, but I do think that's the way to go, to be honest, to start the season. But yeah, I think it's a really nice teammate. I've gone for a 9 out of 10, and you can see there, Draft Time gives you 60 expected points for game week 1. Now, our penultimate team comes from Vardy Boys on Twitter. He's gone for Johnston, who I personally think is the best 4.5 million keeper in the game. It looks like he's going to start for Crystal Palace, who improved a lot defensively under Roy Hodgson. I think they kept something like 8 or 9 clean sheets all season, and 6 of them came when Hodgson took over. So you can see that kind of upturn in defensive numbers through Hodgson there. Estupinian and Gabriel, spoken about them lots. I think at 5 million, they're excellent value. Akanji's an interesting one. He's not a player that I would go for because I'd be worried about his minutes, but all throughout last season, he consistently played for Man City across all competitions. So there's no reason to say he's not going to next season as well. So he could be a really good price there at 5 million. The one thing I would say is comparing him to someone like Stones from the Man City defence. I think Stones offers a lot more attacking threat than Akanji does, both from set pieces and the fact he plays in a more advanced position. I really like Luke Shaw as a Man United defender. I think the signing of Onana has meant a lot more people have gone for Onana in their team than Luke Shaw. But I mean, there's absolutely no argument against Luke Shaw, really. I think he's a great option. Man United obviously kept the most clean sheets in the league last season. Shaw is their best defender, in my opinion, or their best player at least that plays in defence. And he's their most attacking one as well. So he's surely going to score the most points out of that Man United defence. This draft has got Mo Salah in it, which I find really interesting. It's quite a nice balanced team. And he's managed to squeeze Mo Salah into it as well, which I really quite like. I think Salah's on for an absolute barnstormer of a season. I don't personally have him in my team because I think if you pad out your midfield with the 8 to 9 million mids, you can probably make up for the points that you lose by not having Salah and maybe get a few more. But yeah, I mean, how can you argue against Mo Salah? I think Liverpool are going to improve on last season with the signings they made in midfield. I've heard that Szoboszlai is going to play on the right-hand side of that Liverpool midfield 3. And he can drift really wide. And obviously you've got Trent as well. I know he plays in midfield, but he's going to be drifting wide to get balls into the box as well. Both of those things mean that Salah's surely going to play a bit more tight and a bit more narrow, which is where his goals come from. So I really am backing him to have a good season. I've talked about Bruno and Saka already. And Mbumo and Mitoma, I think, are great 6.5 million mids. And he's gone for Haaland as his captain. A couple of omissions for me, really. Well, one main one is no Trent. I think you just might be able to squeeze Trent in by downgrading a couple of these players. Maybe Bruno Fernandes to Martinelli, something like that. And then downgrading Wissa as well, because Wissa's a great option, I actually think. I think he's going to play most games for Brentford. The problem is having a £6 million player on your bench, I think, is a bit too much. So maybe going for someone a little bit cheaper than Wissa for your bench. But other than that, mate, it looks a really nice team, and I think it's going to serve you well for game week 1. 60.1 points is your prediction for that. I think that's higher than any team we've showed so far, to be honest. I've given it an 8.5 rating purely because I really like Trent, and I think you've just spent a little bit too much there on your bench. But, I mean, mate, you'd be absolutely fine to go into the season with this team. And the final team comes from Nick Smithy 73. We've got a Pickford in goal in this one. I've already spoken about Pickford going through Josh's team. I'm just not convinced Everton are going to keep that many clean sheets. Like, the argument is under Dyche, they're going to improve defensively, but I don't think you can ever say Dyche has had... Well, they've been played in a defensive way, but have they been good defensively? Obviously, Burnley were pretty good, but I'm just not sure about Pickford. I think you can do better. Someone like Johnston in goal would be better than Pickford, in my opinion. I'm not a massive fan of Botman, although I can see you've got a Botman-Henry rotation there, which could work for you. Obviously, Botman with Villa, slightly higher expected points than Henry for game week 1. And then Botman, the reason I'd be put off by him is Man City and Liverpool in 2 and 3, basically. I think you could just go for someone like Matty Cash, who has obviously the same fixture as Botman. They play each other in game week 1 and then 2 slightly stronger fixtures, 2 and 3. But I guess you do have Henry there for rotation as well. Gabriel and Estupinian, they're in pretty much everyone's teams at the moment. Top XG in the league for defenders for Gabriel and Estupinian. 3 great fixtures to kick off. The most attacking and nailed in the team for Brighton. Salah, again, this is another draft with Salah in it. I really like Salah. I think he's on for a really good season, and I actually backed him to score more points towards at the end of the season than Haaland does. The reason I've got Haaland and not Salah in my personal team is I think that's because Haaland's going to get an injury at some point this season. Bruno Fernandes and Martinelli, spoken about them. This is the first team I've seen with Raheem Sterling in it. Based off pre-season, Chelsea have so many good attacking players that I'm actually not sure if Sterling's going to be starting for them. Obviously, Nkunku I think is nailed to start for them. I really do. They've got Madueke, Mudryk, other players as well. I'm just not sure Sterling's going to be starting. Well, yeah, I can't put my money on Sterling starting for Chelsea. I think it's the right statement there. Similar with Foden as well for Man City. I'm just not sure how many minutes he's going to get with Bernardo seemingly playing on the right wing and Kevin De Bruyne back fit. Calvert-Lewin, he just can't stay fit. I know you've got a decent bench there to cover, but I'm just not convinced Calvert-Lewin's going to stay fit for long enough this season to be an option. I mean, I think he played 20 minutes in pre-season and managed to get himself injured again. Haaland, absolutely makes sense to go for him and as your captain. I actually like the idea, if you have Salah in your team and Haaland as well, I like the idea of captaining Salah and then just having Haaland, because obviously you miss out on the bonus captaincy points for having Haaland, but you could maximise the points you get from Salah. I think if you go for, the reason you'd be going for Salah, of course, is, well, the points that you could score, and just to be a bit different as well, I feel like Salah as captain, if you've got Haaland at your team, could be a good way to go, particularly in game week 2. Henry, Vinicius and Bell on your bench. I'm not sure Vinicius, how many minutes he's going to get. With Mitrovic leaving, maybe he gets minutes, and he didn't do too badly last season, to be fair, but I don't know. I just think you can do better. Bell and Henry are fine, though. I really like them as options. I've given it a 7 overall. I'm just a few players in there I'm not sure about, namely Pickford, Botman, Sterling, Foden, and Calvert-Lewin. I think that's 4 players I'm not massively sure of there, which is why I've given you a 7. I just think you can do better in each of those positions. I know maybe you just have your own way of playing the game, and if you have a conviction that all of these guys are going to do well, then absolutely fair enough, play it your way. But I just think Sterling, Foden, and Calvert-Lewin are minutes risks, and Pickford and Botman, I think there are higher scoring players in their position for their price. Alright, and that's the end of the video. I just want to thank all the managers that sent in a draft to me on Twitter. Unfortunately, I just don't have time to go through all of them. I was very lucky. I had 30 or 40 replies to my tweets, so I'm very grateful to everyone that did reply and the guys that got picked out. I hope you enjoyed your little review there of your teams. And if you're watching this and your team didn't get reviewed, please let me know if you found it useful. I mean, just think knowing, what I think of other people's teams should be helpful for you as well. I mean, I picked a little bit of a variety of teams there, and I think, to be honest, they'll cover most of the players that people are going to have that are watching this video. Or at least I'm hoping that's the case. So let me know in the comments what you thought. And yeah, leave a like rating on the video if you enjoyed, and subscribe to the Golden Goal channel just about here if you want to see more content from me. And I'll see you in the next video.